All right, so Nancy, you want to come up and we can start our conversation also? Nancy also has been part of SMLA for a very, very long time. Very, very big supporter. So thank you for being here. And again, questions that come up, you guys let us know. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to learning and development and what's happening with training out there also. So why don't you start with talking about your new company that you're with, Red Nucleus, and we can kind of go from there.
Okay, so welcome everyone, and I'm so glad to see the people in person and also to be connected to our friends online. So I'm Nancy McMonigal, and I am with Red Nucleus, which is a new company for me. So Red Nucleus is a very large consulting company, global. We are in Japan and Australia and Europe and Canada and the US. And we've been around for 30 years, and we're focused on the educational approach for life sciences companies. And we can work with customers what we call pre-commercial side, of course, and then all the way through the product life cycle as you commercialize. So we have teams that work with on the research side that are helping startups and veteran companies apply for FDA approval through clinical trial information, through marketing, all the medcoms that need to happen, and how to position the product. And then where I live is on the learning and development side. And that's when the product is about to be commercialized or is commercialized, and how to educate the sales training, marketing staff, internal staff, customers, and patients. Check. All right. So that's where who I work with now. And the reason I chose to move over to Red Nucleus is I'm just impressed with their innovation and the types of effect that they're having through education with the clients. So my passion is in learning and development, and I've been in this field for 15 plus years, a lot longer, but I say 15.
Exactly.
And so
I think we've all been in our industry for 15 plus years, right?
Yeah,
exactly
that's a career coach in this group.
Right. We call it seasoned in recruiting. We're all seasoned.
So, and why I gravitated to this is, I think really my story is because of my dad. And as I grew up in Minneapolis, I watched my dad. He was in many different sales capacities. And he always took the time to stop and listen and educate his customers on whatever it was he was selling. And I saw this growing up, and I saw the positive impact that he had. And that was what really kind of hooked me when I started accidentally in life sciences training. And the first project I worked on really went direct to the patient. And when I saw that we could actually help patients with treatment decisions through education, I was hooked. So that's how I ended up where I am.
How many of you have been motivated by either one parent or both to do what you do today? I know I'm the same way. Yeah, I think it's a great story. I mean, it's whether sometimes you're motivated to not do what your parents do.
Correct.
You're like, oh wow, thanks for showing me, Mom and Dad. I don't want to do that, in a million years. By other times, it's kind of like, yeah, I kind of see what they do and the enjoyment they get out of it, and so it's kind of a nice kind of framework for you, if you will.
Absolutely.
For example. Yeah, great. So in terms of life sciences, I know there's a lot of learning and development theories and structures and approaches out there, but I would imagine in the life science space in particular, because it's so technical, right? All the scientists are obviously brilliant people. How do you go about training the technical folks versus the non-technical folks, whether they're in sales or marketing, what have you?
And that's obviously a loaded question, but it's the foundation is in how you train everybody. Even and I've never been a school educator, a teacher in our educational system, but it's the same type of principles. So in life sciences, the biggest difference is FDA and regulation and regulatory. And so there are internal teams in every life sciences company that is composed of medical, legal, and regulatory review. And so what makes the educational materials a little bit more complicated is that you actually are writing for this review board, and Michael is nodding his head as he knows, and so it's a nuance. You have very I want to say unique writers that not only understand the medical therapeutic area that you're writing for, whether it's cardiology or diabetes or whatever, but you also have to write in a way that you are doing the proper verbiage, the messaging that's approved. And so that marketing will allow for it. And then regulatory and legal, because many different companies, and this is where you get into definitions of off-label and on-label, and you know that package insert that comes in every product that we buy, like even in an aspirin, like let's say we buy Tylenol and there's that little tissue paper folded up piece of paper. That's called the prescribing information or the instructions for use. That's what the FDA regulates the company to talk about. And if you talk about even your training materials that is not on that label, then that's where the millions and millions and millions of dollars of lawsuits happen. So these companies have these regulatory groups, hired teams inside of every company, and we have to really write to them. And so what we tend to do is you look at which audience within the company is the most complicated, and or the deep, has the deepest knowledge, tends to be sales training. It's the sales team. Because the sales team is right out there with your customer. So we tend to figure out, okay, so what level does the sales team need? Do they know the therapeutic area? Or do we have to educate them on, are they new to cardiology? So that is the deepest. And then you look at, okay, so if you have your field service team, maybe the technical people out in the field fixing the product, what level of knowledge do they need? And then what does marketing need? What do your internal, just your leadership need? Or your new hires in accounting, what do they need? So we start with the deepest route, and then plan for how are you going to slice and dice for the other audiences. But it takes a lot of time.
A lot of prep time, yeah, exactly.
It takes a lot of time, a lot of planning.
Well, we were joking about being in this business for more than 15 years,
yes,
right?
Yes.
So, everything has changed over the last 5, never mind 15, 20 plus, right? What's different about learning and development today, whether it's scientific or otherwise, versus what it was when you first got into the business? How has that evolved, if you will?
Well, the obvious answer is technology, of course, and access to learning. But I also want to say that how we learn has not changed. So most of us are visual learners, and then there's auditory learners, and then hands-on kinesthetic learners. And so we all fall into categories of how we learn. And a lot of that has not changed since we've been kids. And so what has changed is how we package the learning. So what happened for the pandemic is, of course, from a worldwide perspective, and this has never happened before, where everybody had to figure out how to learn virtually. And the pros and cons of all of that, all the way down the line for whoever audience you are. But because of that, things like, and I'm going to look at Phil, things like learning through video or learning through podcasts or things that we just kind of, oh yeah, that was cool at one point and I haven't done that in a while. All of those things came into play again. And so it's really about how you package it. And some of the things, the examples we'll talk about is how mixed reality really got a good shot in the arm.
Yeah, sure.
And so how we're using augmented reality, how we're using virtual reality as one learning asset in the whole program. So I think the biggest change I saw happen is really strategizing and planning, how are you going to layer these pieces of learning? Instead of just, well, okay, well, no one can meet in person. So the first thing that happened was everybody took their PowerPoints and threw them online. And then just went, okay, well, we'll do a webinar and we're going to use my same PowerPoint and we're going to do a 2-hour webinar and can't figure out why nobody learned anything. But we didn't know, everyone, so we kind of learned.
Yeah, exactly.
And it just like how Zoom kept adding features as the whole world was using it.
Yeah, expected different, yeah. So I'm curious, when you go into a new prospect, does the prospect expect you to present to them how you will be teaching, right? Or is that kind of a differentiator for you, where you're able to use that mixed reality, approach?
Yes.
I'm kind of curious about how much of it is you asking them what they want versus them saying, "Hey, what do you think we should use?"
Well, as a true consultant would say, that depends.
That depends, sure.
But
it's all about the gray area.
It's all about the gray area. No, but in truth, it's a combination.
Okay.
So and I work a lot with medical device and diagnostics companies. That's kind of my expertise area. And what will happen is the training directors, the sales training director, has an idea, and going back to the question you just asked, training really hasn't changed. It's, you have to expose people to your service, your product. You have to help them figure out how to sell it, how to talk about it. Those concepts haven't changed.
Yeah.
So there's a formula.
Okay.
So you have a general template. But usually what we do is we say, okay, why are you concerned about this? Why have you called us? Is it because you have a new product and it's innovative in the marketplace?
Right.
So that means nobody really knows. Not only do they not know about the product, but they don't know about the positioning in the market. And an example of that is, and this is an example where we used mixed reality really effectively, is that there was an ultrasound machine being introduced in the marketplace. Okay, well, ultrasound machine, ultrasound. How could an ultrasound machine be different? Okay, so that was a big challenge for the company. Obviously, millions and millions of dollars go into all of this. An ultrasound machine in a hospital or in a doctor's office is a capital purchase. That is not an easy sale, and they don't change very often. So what's the differentiator? So what the company did is they asked us to tell a story. And so what we did is we used virtual reality for the physicians and for the healthcare professionals that are going to be the influencer to buy this, to say, okay, put on the headset, we're going to walk you through an environment, okay, see the patient, an animated patient in the doctor's office, we're going to use the ultrasound machine. But here's what this particular scope on this machine is going to give you that you never had before. And so as it went through with the intended, I don't know if it was whatever the procedure was, and we actually did a 3D we added a 3D animation to show them what the imaging was going to be, and then followed it with the data, because that was their differentiating factor, is they had data and AI that hadn't been correlated before. So we were going to a medical conference, and they wanted to launch this in front of the physicians. So this was one component in the educational piece, was, okay, this is how it's going to change. So this is where you're still using the same pieces, but you're framing it and using a
Packaging it
different
different, yeah.
story, packaging it a little bit
rather
different.
than just showing them a PowerPoint of what's going to be different, they can actually put on this stuff and experience.
And experience it. Exactly, Amy. That's exactly
And
what
so then
happens.
do you have the resources internally to create that 3D animation? Is that an in-house studio almost?
We do, and I was telling Michael earlier, it was when I started, and I'm looking at how augmented reality and virtual reality are being used in device companies, and I thought, oh wow, this is really great. What are we doing here? And it was almost like like this secret door was locked that I went through this door, and I'm like, oh, there's this. We have a huge department that's been doing this for 10 years that has been partnered with Microsoft and all of the lens manufacturers, etc. And so then I started, pulling the thread and saying, well, tell me what the case studies are.
Right, sure.
And what the common denominator with all of this is that it has to make sense in the overall scope of the learning program. So we've all been in museums and we've all done, virtual reality with gaming or whatever it is, but it has to make sense. And I want to back up just 1 second, Ken, and just level set definitions. So what our company, we use mixed reality as kind of the overarching category, and then augmented reality and virtual reality fall under that. And augmented is where you're sitting here in the chair, you're sitting at your desk, and you use a device to have an overlay of an image, and then you interact on your device, but you're still sitting in your chair.
Yeah, right.
So
I've seen that a lot with in the automotive side, and rather than having a printed out owner's manual, if you will, or diagnostic, assessment, whatever, for the mechanic, they have augmented reality where they hold their phone over whatever part of the engine that is having a problem, and on the phone it's showing them how to fix it or the steps to go through, rather than having to go through an actual written directions or instructions.
That is
or Pokemon Go, if you want to go that route.
Pokemon Go, absolutely.
Or some of the maps now, maps programs.
Right, yeah, true.
The maps programs have that, and
It's
that
all augmented reality, yeah.
we are seeing that a lot. Like a lot of the device companies and the diagnostics companies that I'm working with, you don't have to jump to, the complete immersive virtual reality with the glasses.
Right.
This augmented reality, I think, is really a key aspect that's expanding learning.
Right.
With print, you used a great example. We've been seeing that too with a product catalog and having certain products. So marketing obviously will prioritize the different aspects and products that they want to sell. So you would start there. And the great thing for us is all of these 3D models are already created. The company has already created them. So we're using them, enhancing them, and then adding them through a QR code to the product catalog. I even had one of our, which is such a, like you said with the automotive mechanics thing, we don't think about how you already have an asset.
Right.
It's just how do you enhance it?
Sure. What platform is it delivered on?
What
Yeah,
platform?
Exactly.
And now I have this horrifying image of the surgeon in the OR, and he's got my chest cracked, and he's holding his phone.
Yeah.
Oh,
What should I do next?
oh, I have some examples, Amy.
Yeah. Well, I know like NuVasive is
I've
really
been in
big
the
on
OR a
doing
lot. I can
virtual
just
reality,
imagine.
fully virtual reality training for a lot of their physicians as well, where they have cadavers in one location
Yeah.
and the physician is in a different one, and they have it's a fully virtual reality training program to go through how do you do this spinal surgery. Is there a question?
We're doing that.
Yeah.
What kind of feedback you get from the clients? Like, is it,
Oh, what kind of feedback from the clients, from the customers? Yeah. In terms of their adoption of this technology? Yeah.
Yes. So what kind of feedback we're getting from the customers, particularly with VR? It's how well is it placed? in the overall education. Like the example I used with the ultrasound machine, that was for a specific show, and then we were able to take that and then have the sales reps use that, and that was very well received because we also had video of it. That's the other thing that we're doing, because not everybody can stomach virtual reality. So virtual is when you have to have a headset or glasses and you are completely immersed.
Right. It's like,
And-
it's like an IMAX screen, but up
Correct.
right against your eyes.
And not everyone can stomach it.
Yeah, my wife can't.
Yeah,
it's just-
and
exactly.
so
Yeah.
so that's where it's how they're reacting really is making sure that it's placed in the right spot, that it's not just cool because it's cool.
Right, exactly.
And what
It needs to really enhance the training
it has to
experience,
enhance. And what Amy was saying about, you're seeing a surgeon kind of with this screen over the body, and Ken was just talking about that. I just went to a conference, and Medtronic was talking about some of the ways that they were using augmented reality in the surgical suite. And Amy, you might want to just close your ears to this, but they're actually proctoring in, like holographically, from AR technology, the person from the company into the surgical suite to help the surgeons. And it's a combination, like there's, Zoom, and then they can do the AR, they do the AR piece when they need to understand a dial or a setting or something very specific on the product. And then that person kind of goes into the background, then the surgery will happen. So it's a combination. I haven't seen it yet where it's during surgery and you've got the AR proctor person.
It makes sense because I've worked on a lot of new medical device startups, right? Mine
Absolutely.
more than 15 years of experience.
Yeah.
And so there was a time, and I spent some of my years before HIPAA, when we could be in the OR.
You could.
All the time. I loved being in the OR.
You could.
But the sales reps would actually provide a lot of input and guidance during procedures.
Right, sure.
It's
So
huge.
It makes total. I mean, I'm kind of joking, like the iPhone being held
Yeah.
up in the chest, but for real, a ton of guidance. Like it's a new, hip implant, and how does it exactly this one work?
Does it fit in? Yeah, exactly.
So it makes a huge amount of sense to be able to have pictures and animations and stuff in the OR.
Absolutely. And one of the examples that we did with what Amy was just explaining about. So she was.
Nancy's good at that.
Yes. So Amy was just explaining about how combining the virtual reality and the augmented reality together in the OR makes a lot of sense with training, because in the past the sales reps used to be able to be in the surgical suite during the operation. Well, what really accelerated this technology, of course, is the pandemic. So no one was allowed in the hospital. So that's what really advanced the technology. And to be able to, again, going back to combining the different pieces together, that's what's really innovative now. It's and the data. So now it's all AI generated, and so then they're getting the data back, and then they're seeing like, oh, was that an effective, are they getting better outcomes with the different assistance happening during the surgery. One of the examples we did is we created, because of course, 3D printed models, right? So we're still doing some of that AR work with a model. And what we did for one customer for surgery is we sent the model ahead of time. And then if you took your iPad over the model, it triggered. It was a blonde kind of agnostic body, and then you did the iPad over the body, and then it was a skeleton a man, and then overlaid, you had a training module. So what we were doing is right before the surgery or the day before the surgery, the physicians were doing that module so that it was fresh in their mind, and they have a model there. It's actually in the suite for them, and then when they went to do surgery, then they could have the Zoom presence or the proctoring of that rep. So it's combining all these things. It's fascinating.
So we talked earlier about, kind of joking about the different ways that people learn. You said that really hasn't changed all that much. My question would be around the generations. So if you're training a sales team that's just out of school and they're in their 20s and they're literally digital natives versus somebody like us that are a little bit older than 20s, right? Who's kind of grown up learning a different way. How do you adjust the training process, right, to accommodate a 40-year age span?
And a lot of what we're seeing is that we have to get on that train. We have to get on that fast train.
Sure.
So it's all about YouTube learning. It's all about 2-minute intervals. Excuse me, and
kind
it
of
goes
shorter attention span, quick little.
And it's I would say a lot of maybe shorter attention spans. I'm thinking however we want to describe that. I don't know if that's young or old. I know I have a short attention span.
True.
But what
It's not
happens?
age-specific.
It's not age specific. But what it is the overload of information. So, excuse me, we are just inundated with information. And so keeping it short, but putting it in an organized fashion, layering the approach, yes, digital, yes, because of that younger audience. However, a lot of it is digital, Ken, because you can track it, because it's easy for the data, and then you can assimilate that data. And like, for instance, with Medtronic, the 3 different augmented reality and virtual reality programs that they created, they built in really deliberate measurement tools to measure the state of, okay, so what do you know now, the pre-assessment, and then after you go through these different examples, then did you increase knowledge? So we do that in the learning world all the time, with our programs. But what was a little unique for this is that their innovation department in their surgical teams, they got granted the money to actually invest in some of these really neat immersive technologies, but they had to measure it. And so they used the same thing, quick, short, little bits with a whole bunch of videos, animations, printed, AR on the printed pieces. And then they also created a program, and I haven't seen any of our other customers do this yet, to train the sales reps on selling skills, on the kind of that soft skills, is that they did an augmented reality, like healthcare professional. I was just trying to think of how to say it. So through an iPad, and they had a pre-recorded video of all these different scenarios. And so if the sales rep had to do objection handling, okay, I want to place this in your office, and the physician says, well, I can't afford it. And so then the AI in this role play tool already had different audio and video recorded, and it changes, and all those responses changed on the fly. And it was a really cool tool that they've been using through the pandemic. And when you think about it, it's like, well, yeah, you could run that with just putting teams together on Zoom and, you can practice and all of that. But what was awesome about this AI tool is that it was collecting all the data. So then it could inform leadership on the areas that really were struggling.
Interesting. Yeah, I wonder, any questions, by the way, before Amy?
So,
Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
I'm just curious, I'm sitting here as a device person who's worked in a few big companies, but also a lot of startups, and thinking, wow, this sounds expensive. I wonder how many of us can access it. And then I'm curious, with what you do, there's so many different constituents. With the work that you do, where is most of it? Is it patient? Is it doctor? Is it sales? Where are these things really being deployed in terms of kind of the spending? Companies making the decision to invest in this, because I'm suspecting that it's a fairly significant investment.
It can be. So what Amy is asking is really about the budget. And so, it's cool to have mixed reality, which is what I said. That's a really, it's a very cool thing. And how is the budget allocated and for what audience? And I'm going to say it depends. And it does. But it depends on the product. So where we have found the willingness to spend is anything customer facing. So it could be the healthcare professional in my case, whatever your customer is. And then also if it's patient facing. So we do a lot of work with diabetes. And so continuous glucose monitoring systems, something that is that a patient has to use every day. There is an appetite to spend with those, particularly with those two audiences. And that's where you're going to get the highest knowledge transfer in the fastest amount of time. So that's and I'm really glad you asked that, Amy, because that's the other thing that we have seen really driving this more immersive technology is that the data is showing, which it's like the newest data point, and there's really nothing new in learning, like I said, but that if you use immersive technology, it increases knowledge. Like it's a huge jump. And I can share that data. I can share that with everybody. And so we have a question on that.
And this is sort of related, but Jen is asking, do you feel that all of this is a lead up to the metaverse? And there was another add-on question, what tools are you using to educate prospects on the process and its advantages?
So it definitely could be leading to the metaverse. That I don't know the answer to that, but
Let's hope not.
Yeah, let's hope not. Let's hope not. I think, and the reason I would say no necessarily is because I honestly haven't seen it, because innately we don't change the way that we learn. I mean, YouTube has changed us in the fact that we're going to learn in smaller bites, but I think just personally what I've seen is it's not necessarily attention span. It's more back to that thing about we are inundated with information, and so it's how we're going to segment our
the curation
brains.
of that information.
Exactly,
Yeah, right,
that's the better word for it. It's how we curate. So I think we're always going to learn in the same way, and we're going to have different things given to us on how we learn. And mixed reality, whether it's augmented or virtual, is here. And it's, we're seeing it in every industry. And I think where it's going to continue in our lives, like right now it is kind of cool. And right now it solved this need with surgeries and hospitals, clearly in medical. Huge advantage. I was asked by one of the device companies if we could help. This gets to the second part of the question, Elaine, is how do they decide where to use it and how to use it? It's all about the gap they're trying to solve. So a customer that I'm talking to, a prospect, asked me, so they have a lot of their market share in China. Right now, China is locked down.
Yeah.
And so how they can't get anybody into the hospitals there to help with their product, and it happens to be in the surgical suite. Well, they don't have an augmented reality proctor there. They didn't plan for that. So we are actually talking to them about, okay, well, what is the biggest need? First of all, what's the therapeutic area? And what we have to unpack it. And it could be that Zoom may be the solution for them, something already there, because they have a need now. Well, they're not going to have a 3-month lead time to create something, but future planning they can. And I think the other part of Amy's question about budget is that it depends really on what the customer is trying to accomplish in the marketplace. So another example, I'll answer that with this case study. So we worked with a migraine product. Okay, a lot of migraine products out there. Millions of people suffer from migraines. So theirs was kind of, and you'll understand this, Amy, it's kind of a Me Too product. So, okay, so what is going to get the physician to change to this product versus another product? Well, what we did is we told a story. So they needed to, their challenge was they needed to change a mindset from a physician. So what we ended up doing is we told the story from a day in a life of a patient. So we pitched an idea that let's create virtual reality and let's immerse the physician, first of all, the sales rep, and then as a kind of train the trainer concept, and then the physician into what happens to, in this case, happened to be a woman, what happens to her in the course of her day when she has a migraine. So it was a 3.5-minute virtual reality, small bite, and it started with her leaving the house in the morning, going to work, and as she went through her day, she was in the conference room and a migraine happened. And it was from her point of view. And so the company had an appetite to pay for that because they knew they had to change a mindset. And the data that they got from not only the sales reps, because the sales reps were not excited about selling this. They're like, oh, great.
Yeah,
like a Me Too product. What am I going to say about it? Not only were the sales reps more engaged, but they had an increase in sales almost immediately with using it with the healthcare professionals. So that's what will drive the budget, is what is it you're trying to say? What is different? And then we'll work with the customer to make sure it fits correctly. Like that wasn't all of the training. That was just 3.5 minutes. But that ended up to be the most impactful piece.
It's interesting. It's questions. We're good.
So
Yeah. Sorry.
can you quantify that? Like a few years ago, I was working with one of the groups to do a VR project. It's going to be about a 3.5-minute simulated environment. It was $250,000 was the number that we got them down to.
Right.
And I guess, from you don't have to say how much that migraine product was. Or Medtronic pays for some of the stuff they're doing. But what's like the least somebody can pay to sort of like?
No, it's true.
At what point does this become possible for somebody who doesn't have a 7-figure budget?
Or maybe a question is, what does the ROI have to be? Does it have to be a minimum of 5x per your investment? Is 2x enough? Right? Because if you're spending,
both ways of looking at it.
He's asking for a hurdle. Like where's the place that I can even consider?
Start.
Because a lot of us are in San Diego, smaller companies.
Absolutely.
Startups. So
can I do this for $250,000?
Yeah, what is the floor? What is the minimum investment that you would need to make it viable?
And I think it's because what we're seeing is because it is becoming more part of our vernacular, leadership in the companies are absolutely understanding that it fits in life sciences. If we were sitting here 3 years ago, no way. It's like pie in the sky, only the big Medtronics.
So it really accelerated because of the pandemic.
It has really accelerated. So the piece that I am seeing that is affordable is what Ken was talking about. It's the field service, it's the product manuals, it's the taking the piece of paper and embedding the QR codes and having a 3D model come to life because the company already has that built. So what you're hiring us to do is figure out the right training
And digitize it all.
and the right and put it together, working with the company on what they already have. That's where we're seeing a lot of legs. I was telling Kevin and Michael earlier, I was on a call earlier this morning, and I was watching our team. They actually said broke PowerPoint, but they enhanced a PowerPoint deck for a client by embedding HTML into the PowerPoint with an asset that was already built. And so that's
And so then, to your point,
yeah.
that's not going to cost $250,000
No.
to embed that.
No.
So that could still bring some good results without that much of an investment, depending upon what the existing content might be
Exactly.
for the customer.
Exactly.
I
And
think you're politically answering the question.
yeah.
Well, there's probably no
Yeah.
number. I mean, yeah.
Like, can somebody do virtual reality,
Sure.
a 3-minute virtual reality for less than $500,000?
Of course. Of course you can, because it's going to depend on, it's going to depend on what do you want it to be at the end. Do you want it to be a fully simulated, fitness center, or do you want it to just be a barbell? And so what piece, what is it that you're trying, and that's
It's not going to be like Avatar quality CG, right? Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Exactly right.
And there are a lot of people. That's true.
I have
Elaine has a
before
question.
that question, I have a
Okay.
question. So you've used the word story a lot of times,
Mm-hmm.
and as you've been talking, I keep thinking I could be sitting here with the CEO of a branding marketing agency, hearing a lot of the same things, but you're a learning and development company, so it sounds like there's a bit of a blurring of what you have to do to get customers. Because
Absolutely.
you're having to tell stories, not just say, hey, I can train your people, but it's how do I train them differently?
That's what it is.
Okay,
It's
is that-
how,
is that-
and that's a really good nuance. I like that. It is. It's how we train them differently because, and the people in the learning development world will get this immediately. Is that the reason why we have blurred those lines with marketing and training is because the companies that don't quite get it, they don't necessarily invest in learning. It's kind of an old adage where training will fix everything. Okay, sales are down. They need, sales
training,
reps
yeah.
need better training. Why aren't they trained? And that's why blurring those lines between marketing and sales, that's the age-old
Right, sure.
conversation, right? How do marketing and sales work together? And so that, I think, is why, well, that's a key reason why I decided to go to Red Nucleus is because of how effectively they were doing the marketing pieces. The marketing is the one that pays for the animations
Right.
and they pay for the 3D models and all of that. And how is that being repurposed into learning, but yet learning is no longer the afterthought. It has to come up into the front thought
And
process.
as another tool that the sales
Yes.
team can then use out in the field as well. So it's just
Exactly.
kind of
Exactly, and then goes back to that whole money discussion of, sales holds, marketing holds the money.
Right, sure.
You have to
And
drive
what's the
that
budget?
home. I think the point is, it needs to be in the budget when you come up with products.
Mm-hmm.
When you're a new product,
That's a
you have
good
to
point.
think about L&D in a different way than you have in the past. And
Right.
I think to add to the question about what does it take to make it happen is, you already know you have a budget for training somewhere. You can make that more impactful training, taking the same budget, maybe adding a little bit, but knowing that it's going to generate more sales or
Right,
faster
right.
adoption. Then you've got the win. Companies are just, I think that Nancy's point, is just trying to figure that out now.
Right.
That's
How
right.
do we move it upstream back
Right.
so that engineering departments and marketing departments can bake that in,
Yeah.
so it's not a post-sales discussion.
Right. That's a great.
Yes.
Yeah. So kind of summarize. So Michael's saying it's it's important that the sales and marketing, engineering, R&D, that whole team understands the need to embed this at the outset versus
Correct.
waiting until the very, very end. So it's part of the overall budget, overall process. If I'm paraphrasing correctly,
Yep, absolutely.
Yep.
part of the overall budgeting process from the very beginning, not an afterthought or not a reaction to sales are down. Let's all of a sudden create an L&D group or session.
That's right.
But it should be there from the very beginning.
And and thank you, Michael, for summarizing like that, because it is that is the significant change that we've seen because of the pandemic.
Interesting.
Is that you have to think about training as part of the product.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Well, and whoever builds that has to track it to revenue.
Right.
At the absolute beginning, or
Right.
it's not gonna, it
Exactly.
has to, so, the glucose monitor, right?
Correct.
If you can show that having the thing for the patient increases compliance and use and keeps them, using it and all that stuff, then
Right.
it tracks directly to revenue, because there's a consumable that goes
Right.
with it.
Absolutely.
I mean, to summarize again,
Absolutely.
it comes back around to we all as leaders and our clients all as leaders have to think about budgeting differently. It's not just, okay, this is my sales budget, this is my marketing budget, and God forbid they ever, meet, right?
Right.
This is the product. This is the budget for the overall product that incorporates R&D and product development and the sales aspect and marketing and training, almost on a product-specific P&L, if you will, to incorporate all of it. There's another question? Yeah.
Are there any new regulations that are specifically associated with these new technologies? And I'm looking at MSUs or FDA.
Yeah.
That's a
Every Jan is
really
probably knows, yeah.
That's a really
Yeah.
Yeah, so the question is, are there new regulations based on these immersive technologies from the FDA? And I don't know of any. I haven't been hearing of any, but
Regulators are always slow to catch up to reality.
Yeah, like,
Yeah, right, exactly.
so,
right.
like, let's,
They're always playing catch up.
but remember as well, just to bring home that point when we started, is that every single piece of education, to Ken's point, because it's blurred with the marketing messages, are written for these internal review departments, medical, legal, and regulatory, and nothing gets through them before it gets out to the reps and to the customers. So those internal regulatory groups are connected to the FDA, as well as our teams are connected. And so as we're writing, we're working with those internal groups. So if certain things change, then we have to incorporate that. But I'm sure something will happen.
I think one of the challenges comes back to your AI discussion about the machine learning
Absolutely.
being able to generate new content
Yep.
based on the context. There's no way a lawyer can review that in advance.
Absolutely.
It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
That's a very good point.
And so it's going to be.
And I'm sure it's a good point you bring up. Attorneys can't get involved fast enough, right? But also from every industry out there, it's going to be different.
It's going to
And
be
even
different.
within under the life sciences broad umbrella, med tech versus biotech versus pharma versus whatever it is, diagnostics, each one's going to have its own set of rules and regulations too.
That's exactly, and it's the AI-driven it's that AI-driven data that makes the companies really nervous. And so how we write for that, it's a PC way to say that, is for that type of technology, and this is what Medtronic did, is it had nothing to do with the product. So it was all about selling skills.
Interesting.
And so it was about, okay, if I'm positioning it, so it wasn't altering marketing messages or anything like that. So that's how they got this initial pilot approved. Is, keep it PC and, talk about
More generic, so to speak.
listening skills and
Right,
exactly.
yeah.
How do you tell if your customer is ready to buy? All of those kinds of things. But that's where the FDA and the lawyers are going to have a hard time, especially with AI generated information. Oh, stuff to think about.
Other questions? Okay. So I'm curious, I know we have a few minutes left just to kind of wrap up, but
Okay.
I'm curious about the industry as a whole, right? Are you finding, it's kind of a loaded question, are you finding the decision time for your customers to say, yes, we're ready to start using you, we want you guys to handle all of our L&D, is that taking longer? Are you seeing any changes among your customers with their buying habits?
Good question. Let me think about that. So I think if they have a product that is going to launch,
Okay.
then they can make
They're
a
ready to go,
decision.
yeah, okay.
They're ready to go. So, we answer RFPs all day long and, all of that kind of thing. Launching a product is the motivator. And so a lot of device and diagnostics companies have the same product, but they have updates to the product. So that's where I have seen a longer lead time, because a lot of those companies, particularly device companies, especially I'm thinking like the larger companies like Philips Healthcare or GE Healthcare, Medtronic is a good example too, is that they have teams of people and instructional designers that just, crank out the updates, but they'll hire us to create the overall blueprint for a new product launch. And we work with our customers that way to, let's create the strategy, let's create the blueprint, we'll get you going, and then we'll come in for maintenance. And then let us focus on the new, the new products that are launching, but yet your internal staff can then kind of maintain those updates. So I think with the mixed reality, absolutely, that's a long selling cycle.
Sure. I imagine.
Also, the startup companies, I think we're all have that as well, is that they are, unless we have an existing relationships.
Sure.
If we have an existing relationship, they will make, even if they're at a small company, they will make a decision quickly.
Right, sure.
If we don't have any relationship and we're thrown into the mix with one of three, very long selling cycle.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Well, I think
Yeah.
a lot of us, and all the folks I talk to out there in different industries, a lot of people are seeing a bit of a change in terms of customer buying habits. There are more folks that are involved in the decision. There are more folks that are taking longer, right? Budgets are a big issue, obviously, right now. Innovation's a big issue. So it's evolving, right? And I think, it's a great way to kind of bring it full circle. What you said in the beginning about us being inundated with so much information, it's also true of our customers. They're being bombarded by, 15 other search firms and 15 other L&D firms and 15 other, folks that want to help with consultants, right? So how do you stand out and how do you differentiate and get that message across and get that prospect to call you back, right? That's a challenge for everybody out there right now.
That's a huge challenge, Ken, and that's the other common thing that is happening because of the pandemic is this omni-channel focus with marketing and messaging and with training as well. And because the customers are being inundated, but then like a physician will seek out information in a lot of different ways, like their blogs, their journal articles, their different websites that they go to.
Right, sure.
And so we have to shift it used to be multi-channel. We would create one asset and then just put it out there in all different ways. Now we have to change the message
Right.
based on how they are consuming. And like you said, it's everywhere. So do we ask for their advice rather than push information?
Right, sure. And maybe a 70-year-old physician is going to do it differently than a 30-year-old physician.
Absolutely. It's true.
Stereotypically, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Print is still there. We
Yeah.
have a whole print department. We still do
It's
a
still there, yeah,
lot of
exactly.
print tools.
Great. All right. Well, thank you all. It was a great conversation. I mean, I have a lot more questions that we didn't get to, but in the issue of time, I want to make sure that we're sensitive to that. But it was a great conversation. Thanks for giving insight. I'm sure people
course.
can get a hold of you through LinkedIn,
Oh,
the
absolutely.
usual channels, speaking of various channels,
Absolutely.
with other questions as well.
Absolutely.
So please feel free. We're here for an extra few minutes if you want to hang out and talk. Also, great. We'd love to see more people. I'm talking to the virtual audience. We'd love to have more people that are out there in the virtual world here in person next month. So please let us know if you can join us. And our speaker next month, as I mentioned, will be Andy Paul. So that should be a lot of fun also. So thank you all. It's great seeing you. Thanks for coming.
Great. My pleasure. Thanks, everybody.